welcome everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Contact Lost. We are doing the Contact Lost and Stat Checks juxtaposition called Creme de la Creme. This is a series where, together with Nathan from Stat Check and my good co-host Joker, we invite representatives of top 10 teams of last year's WTC or the World Team Championships, and we discuss their preparations, their road to the WTC, their ambition and what they want to achieve over there, their lessons learned from the previous event, and so on and so on and so on. I did already mention them, but I'll do it once more. Once more. So with me today, I have my trusty co-host Joker.
Hey guys.
And Nathan from StatCheck. So welcome, dude.
Hi, everybody. I will remember to do an audio cue. Just this once, though.
He has learned his lesson. Right. And now, today, we want to focus on Team America or Team USA. And we did send a peaceful invitation to them, but all we got in return was violence. So, ladies and gentlemen, we give you Anthony Vanella.
Hello.
Finally on the show. After so many episodes of other shows that I have watched with you, we get to talk to, in person. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, me too. I'm thrilled to be on. I've been listening for a long time.
I'm just so happy. So listen, in the previous episode that we recorded, we spoke to Tony Chu of Team America, Team England, and he said, yeah, I'm just, starstruck. That's fine. I make so many mistakes. So we spoke to the captain of Team England, and when he was here, he basically introduced the English as the heels of 40K. And now, using that wrestling nomenclature, I wanted to start off this interview by asking, is Team USA, or our Team USA, the faces of 40K then? Are you the John Cenas of Warhammer? If they are the heels?
If they're the heels, then I guess. I look at us as like the team that was probably used to be a heel and is trying to recover that into being accepted and liked again. There was definitely a bit of a like everybody in the room rooting against us vibe last year that I've tried really hard to dispel coming into this year. So we'll see if I'm successful when we get there,
Yeah, I said John Cena because I guess many teams that we talk to don't see you as the top 3 team this year. So sorry, I needed to start with some shots fired, but no.
Podcast listeners are really going to miss the best part of that, which was you doing the "don't see me" gesture from John Cena.
Or they are going to be relieved. It depends. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting to hear what Tony Chu had to say about their team and the perception of Team England. Today, I would like to also focus on the topic of, let's call it perspective or perception. And right. I wanted to start this with maybe asking, what is the Americans' perception of the WTC and the European scene as a whole, or European meta as a whole? Because America is like a microcosm. It's like a world within a world, with its own rules, with its own meta, with its own terrain and all that, teams located in different areas, going to tournaments together, etc. It's unlike anything else that we've seen or we see in the world. So is that actually a microcosm, or, do you have some perception of the European meta as well? And is there any sort of maybe respect towards that meta, or do you rather look down upon it from, a high horse?
So I'm pretty uniquely positioned when it comes to this, right? Because I spent a bunch of time over there doing tournaments this last year, between going to Alpine Cup and playing with a pretty internationally put together unit, playing in Coventry, playing in the WTC last year. So any respect that we may or may not have been missing last year going into the event, I think was very quickly caught up when we besides for England, they can talk shit about us when they can stop us from scoring triple digits. But if they keep us under 100 this year, maybe they can get their respect back. But like as an example, we had a super close round into the Aussies. We lost to Poland, like pretty hard. And then we had a draw against Germany. So once we were out of our pods, we played really, really tough games. So I think that brought the respect level up a whole bunch. And then through my time spent in the meta, there's definitely like a firm respect for what is being brought. There's been like massive changes to how Team USA is approaching its structure and its lead up and its, efforts going into the event going in this year. That I think will make us one of the more well-prepared teams in the room, as opposed to last year when, the running joke is that we were like 8 singles players in a trench coat trying to be a team. And I've definitely kind of like beat that down. That's been put to rest. It's an entirely like refocused mindset, and we're coming in, just like any other top team.
So when you say that you've refocused, how have you refocused the team from being 8 singles players in a trench coat to a whole wrestling team? If we're just going to keep with wrestling analogies, I don't know wrestling teams, so we're just going to say a whole one. I don't know.
So we got put together a little bit sooner in the cycle this year. Last year we like kind of knew who would be on the team and like kind of knew who would be playing basically like 2 months before the event, which was a little close. Some knew sooner, some knew later, but like for the most part we weren't really like sat down as a unit having meetings doing things until just before. This year, from basically January all the way through, there's been like constant efforts made to play together on TTS. The whole like deciding of like the last like 5 members of our roster basically was done through like TTS scrims, both internally and externally. We played a ton of the teams that are going this year to kind of get America a little bit more involved in that international community that we are not next to. So it's a little tougher for us to play them in tournaments. So we did it through that way. Just kind of everything top to bottom got restructured. So instead of it just being like the people that are going to be traveling to the tournament being, team members, we now had like a pool of prospects, like the expanded roster of the team out to like 20 or so people. And a lot of those people had a chance to play on the team. And then from that roster, that's kind of where the team was selected, going through a more like traditional selection process than like the Iron Fist of Sean selects the team and no one questions it. We had a bit more of like a selectors council situation this year. So a lot of people got the opportunity to put the work in, and through that, they made the team.
So where did the idea to actually do that come from? Was it like your observation of how other teams do it, or just a letdown with the system to date? How did that come about?
Yeah, the system to date like used to work in the loosest sense, right? Like when like they literally won on that system once upon a time, right? Not that long ago. But between like everyone's like not disappointment, but like a little bit disappointment in our run last year, and like the amount of time that I've then, like I said, spent like kind of engrossed in the scene, since then I was able to take examples from a lot of the teams that I spent time with, right? Scotland, Poland, talking to some of the people on like a whole bunch of the other teams, like the Australian team and stuff like that. I was like, learning that we could do this better, and taking any opportunity where we can do it better to do so, rather than just being like, it mostly worked, we'll just stick with it. It was more of a like, I saw the way that other people were doing it, and with that same amount of like practice, growth, and effort applied to our team, we could definitely do better than we did last year. So might as well give it a shot.
So what were the criteria by which you selected the team members for Team USA this year?
So the initial selection, this team was largely actually out of my hands. We did have a captain switch partially through the year. And the initial captain picked most of the squad. And then there was like some random people that like, some of the chosen starters at the time had been like, hey, this person should come forward. But originally the game plan was that we would have, one pool of what were essentially supposed to be like prospects that wouldn't play this year, and they would be set up for future years. And then a second pool of players that were like people looking to play like this year, like go time right now. That kind of fell apart when the like greater structure kind of collapsed on itself, and Sean came back as captain, and Sean cut down the team a whole bunch down to like 20 or so people total. And that was kind of how we went from there. But the initial selection was just like a broad spectrum of like fairly vague things, right? Because 40K doesn't have a unanimous like ranking system in that way. So it was just, people that you know from being around on the scene, people that had won some of the larger events in the US, people that consistently place, people that had been on high performing teams or played against current members of the team and done well in the past. That sort of thing. There wasn't like a hard, fast, like this person is X rank and Y system, so they're on. It was just more of like a loose like assembly. But again, it had greatly expanded the scope of the team, so it was less of that like boys club stuff that had come up in previous years where there was just 8 people largely from the East Coast on the team. Our team is rather diverse locationally now, which was nice.
Okay, that's cool. So you've got your 8 playing members, I assume by now.
Yeah, we sure do.
Do you also have any non-playing stuff, like I don't know, a non-playing captain, a coach, or what have you, someone to pass out drinks, anything like that? Because a lot of teams are bringing quite big teams of non-playing stuff. So are you doing the same?
Yeah, we have a pretty expanded roster past so we have our 8 playing players, and then we have 4 like formal coaches, and then 4 people that are essentially just there to help. So these are all people that were either, for the most part, were either like prospects that like didn't quite make the cut to make the final 8 roster, or people that had been like dedicated coaches, from the word go. But yeah, we have a pretty large team this year. And I think a lot of the people that are not playing in the teams are playing the singles, which is cool because that's a departure from previous years where normally the USA has a pretty low participation in the War Masters kind of in general. But now we have like 10 people playing in it or something to that effect, which is cool.
So no ban on singles this year.
No teams players are playing the singles. And very strictly speaking, Sean was very clear that we are allowed to play the singles if we so choose. Just so happens somehow that all of the team's players have chosen of their own volition not to.
Where does that come from, though? Is that like a method of keeping playstyles etc. secret, or it's
keeping cards close to your chest, I guess?
Yeah, the idea is that we don't want to get scouted right before the big main event. I mean, another huge part of it is fatigue. Playing all the way through both the singles and then the teams is a pretty like superhuman feat of 40k endurance. It makes it all the more impressive that the Australians did it last year. I have a tattoo on my thigh to show how impressive that was. So yeah, sometimes people do crazy unprecedented stuff, and sometimes you lose a bet. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, I think our team looks at it from like an endurance perspective for the most part, outside of like the like general cultural traditional stuff from the team. It's just like really hard to play 15 perfect or whatever it is games of Warhammer, and I would like to keep our gas in the tank for the thing that we're there to do, which is the teams.
Yeah, I made that remark last weekend when I played against Joker. He came over, we played one game, and I could feel my legs already. And actually, when I was walking him back to the car, I was like, "Dude, do you recall LGT last year where we went to the LGT? Do you remember Vic, who played from like the Invitational through all the days till the final day of?" Yeah, like how do those people do that? Because I couldn't feel my legs after just one game. So. I mean, insane.
Well, they're young, Tomek. They're young. We are not.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, Vic's not a guy who's got a dad bod like us, so maybe that helps.
Thanks for saying us. Thanks for saying us, not you. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Anthony, I wanted to ask about, again, since this is supposed to be primarily about the WTC. Does the American community care at all about your performance at the WTC, or is LVO still considered like the pinnacle of 40k, and WTC is just that summer camp that funny Europeans do in the summer?
So I think in years past, it may have been like that kind of vibe, right? That people would like look to LVO to be like, who's the best player, right? But between LVO's terrain situation last year being a bit of a joke and the whole thing feeling kind of up in the air, going forward between like GW running their own circuit, all these other circuits popping up, all these other circuits being the largest event, on top of like most of the, like a lot of the main like heavily followed content creators in 40k kind of looking to teams as the like the premier way to play 40k, especially after most of Art of War being on the team last year. Um, the narrative has shifted, I think, and now I think the prize is like properly looked at as the WTC is like that's the thing. That's what decides who's the best. And then you can have like minor arguments about who's the best individual player, but I think the scope of that matters a lot less now. Like, yeah, cool, definitely an achievement to be the best in singles, just not quite the achievement it is to be the best in the team.
So we decided that I'm the deliverer of hard questions. That's just my job. It's
Okay.
what I did to Tony last episode. It's what I get to do to Anthony this episode. So the first question is kind of the popular opinion, and definitely what the captain of Team England said last week is there's kind of this perception that Team USA is essentially just Team Art of War, but by another name. And how does the team kind of deal with that perception, and what is the thought about that perception from the wider community?
So there's not much Art of War on the team this year, right? Of the like playing players, only like me, Jack, and John are members of Art of War in terms of like literal employees, right? Matt plays under Art of War when it comes to like ITC team for as much as that's worth, but Matt's been, kind of following the progression there. Like for those that don't know, Art of War's ITC team is a lot of people that used to be on a team called Beast Coast from when basically before I was playing. Because separate side note, I haven't been actually playing that long. So a lot of that stuff like predates that. So there's really like last year it was a much larger contingent of the team was Art of War players, right? But this year roughly half, a little bit more than half, is not. But the simplest answer to that is when you have a competitive endeavor, the people that are paid to be good at it and relay that they're good to it to help others improve are very likely to make the team. And it's more of a marker of consistent success and their ability to like re-qualify for the team. Because there are a number of people that were on Art of War that did not make the team again. Only those, qualifying, willing to put in the work, still attending events, remaining active, things of that nature, made the team again. So yeah, I mean, that's like the short answer is that we took, our best players and 3 of them happen to be Art of War players, and that's the story for this year.
So
I
how
guess
did
that-
the...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
Joker.
go on, Nathan.
No, if you have a follow-up question, Joker, go for it.
Yeah, sort of. So how did the selection process actually look like, and how can someone get involved with Team USA to, become part of the team at some point?
So Sean is like literally as we speak, likely. What time is it? Maybe he's doing kid stuff now. I don't know. He's got that dad life. I'm not sure. But is drafting a charter and what will look like formalized ways to get onto the team going forward. Because last year it was just kind of like who's done really well recently, and we literally like sat down with a list and was like bang 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 and trying to like invite people and do what we can. The criteria this year was simple. It was like consistently do well at events, don't have a cheating scandal, and then based off of those 2 things, you too could make the American team. But like it will probably be something more in that vein. It's just going to have a little bit more of like a formalized process to it. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet because Sean's the boss and I just here to help.
So I guess this is the like obvious follow-up question is who are the members of the team this year, both from the playing side and the non-playing side, just out of curiosity?
So the playing 8 is Sean, Naden, myself, John Lennon, Jack Harpster, Lucas Troller, Eric Forsman, Matt Schuckman. Who am I forgetting? Oh, Jaime Paris. So that's the 8 that are playing. Jaime is, notably he got second at the War Masters last year. He's playing for us this year. Was a huge pickup or pretty early in the year. And then the non-playing roster, I'll just do like our coaches because there's like 3 of those that are
That's
like
fair.
formally our coaches. Otherwise, I end up going through the whole like 25-person roster of the team this year. Is Steven Corrales, Josh C, and Quentin.
So that's a pretty widespread regional distribution of players then.
Yeah, it's huge. And then there's more that go into that as well between Tyler and Naj and so on and so forth. But yeah, we have literally someone from like every region of the US for the most part.
Yeah, I've actually had the good fortune of playing Eric before at
He's a
more
gem.
than
I love
multiple
that
events,
guy.
and he's awesome to play. He beat me with Speed Freaks Orcs before the nerf when I was playing Boat Drukari. And after
Yeah.
turn one, he's like, "Do you just want to go get a drink?" And I was like, "Yes, I kind of do just want to go get a drink." And he and he
Yeah.
bought me, and we both sat down and had a beer and talked about 40K for a while. It's
Yeah.
much better experience. So Eric has like a special place in my heart just for that reason.
Yeah, we love Eric. He's great. He's been a true grinder. Definitely like first in, last out, kind of like hardest worker in the room vibes from that man. He was one of the prospects that made the cut. We've been thoroughly impressed with him.
And I have
So I-
to say I'm impressed because I think you're the first person to actually be able to name the full roster without pausing for too long. So
Yeah, true.
I do my best.
You even
So I-
remembered your coaches, which was like
Yeah,
amazing.
which is
There
like-
you go.
nice.
Blew our
11
minds.
out of 8.
So I have to ask about this because Jaime Paris was the person who brought me back to the hobby after like a longer break. Not personally, but I was watching his videos, talking with passion about Space Wolves and so on and so on.
Yep.
I don't think he's bringing Space Wolves this year, right? So I mean, you're
Not-
probably
who
not going
knows?
to tell us, but do Space Wolves play at all?
I mean, maybe he jumps on those Thunderwolf Cav and advances and charges them directly into your face and hits you real hard. If anyone was gonna make them work, it would be Jaime.
Probably yes. All right. Okay. Let's leave that up in the air then, and let's see at the event. Okay. So another question that I have is, since we've been talking about all those content creators, Art of War being one of them. Art of War, when you watch their videos, I think in their intro, they do
Did he
introduce
disconnect
themselves
or-
as the best players on the planet or something like this. Sorry?
Oh, I'm good now. I was lagging for a second. I think we're good.
Oh, okay. So let me just repeat that. So in the intro to the Art of War, it does say that it's brought on by the best players on the planet. And I do get that sense quite a lot that American players feel like this. Is it that the American players look down upon the rest of the world, and have your trips to Europe actually maybe changed that perception of yours?
So I'll answer this question in two parts because there's like my
Mhm.
personal perception and there's what I understand to be like the wider perception, right?
Mhm.
So for me, I got my come up in 40K largely looking at like what different European and Australian lists were doing and just applying those concepts in the United States and playing them very aggressively with things that people had not seen before or like were uncomfortable with dealing with because it was just different to what they were used to seeing. So I, from the word go, I've always had a strong appreciation of other metas, right? Especially having played over there now, like played in Alpine, again in Coventry, WTC, etc. I don't feel that way at all. I think you'd have to be like kind of silly to be like, yeah, dude, Myson, Duda, easy games. Not going to be a problem. No worries. That's trolling. That's dumb. Anyone that says that is clueless or lying to themselves, right? It's not a thing.
Mhm.
So, now, as far as like stateswide perception, it is definitely harder to follow especially like the mainland Europe tournaments from here, like kind of just in general, right? Like I don't like the streaming and stuff like that just like is less common, less popular, so it's harder to know. So I think some people out of ignorance might accidentally look down on other metas, right? Because they just don't know that they're there. And every time you want to watch 40K, you can watch someone on Art of War play it near a top table at a large tournament.
Mhm.
There's a couple misconceptions with that, right? One, and I think the most leading cause of this is that for so long the like ITC formula was based on event size, not player talent at said event. So if you won a giant event, you got 1 billion points and you got to be top 10 in the world. Woo! Even if that doesn't make any sense, because like the largest tournaments in some places are just like 100 people. And like that doesn't make it any less of a Shark Tank when you're there.
Mhm.
But it doesn't reflect into the fancy ITC points that lots of people like to look at. So I think that sometimes that might be the perception, but it is certainly not the perception of anyone that is anywhere near playing on the American team. Between the scrims and all sorts of other things, we kind of like beat that out of people very early. Even from something as simple as like setting up a matrix, right? Like so for this year's a great example. Like for our newer players, when I was like teaching them about matrixing and we got ready to do our first scrim, a couple people put like 18s and like, 18 or higher in the matrix. I was like, listen, I need you to understand that you're telling me that you're going to beat the best player in that country on that army by 40 every time you play them. Do you think that's accurate? And they'd have to be like, oh, wait, no. So again, it's not so much that there's like an intentional looking down on that happens. I think that some people just, if you've not spent the time and done the research, it's very easy to accidentally be like, it's gonna be fine. And like, that's what the team has me for, right? I'm the ambassador to be like, no, it is not gonna be fine. Don't do that.
So do you think that in previous years that could have been the thing, that it got in the way a little bit, that the ITC sort of created this closed bubble, or I don't know, maybe like a little bit inflated ego that made people look down upon other metas?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a lot of ways it wasn't always necessarily like inflated. It wasn't like that they were looking down so much as that they were just like their own sense of self-play was inflated, right? It wasn't that they were like, they're bad. They were just like, we're really good. And that can cause problems. The shining example that I have of this that causes me pain every time I have to tell this story is right before when we played Poland last year, right before we slid that card back that had craft worlds on it into Myson's Harlequins. I was like, don't do it. And I'll remember it till the day I die. Nick looked at me and went, Brad's gonna Brad. It's gonna be fine. And boy, oh boy, was it not fine.
Myson was a monster last year. That he was like the Eldari eater.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, as a general rule of thumb, the Polish team is pretty stoic during pairings. You don't get a lot of information out of them. And when we handed them the Craft World card, they literally cheered. Like, no subtlety whatsoever. Whole team cheered in our face. And I will remember that until I die.
I think there were two reasons for that. Sorry, Nathan, just one sentence of comment. I think there were two reasons for that. One was that they were counting on it, but the second one was you were like the third team in a row that did the same mistake or made the same mistake. I
looked at the pairings the night before. I was like, don't do it. It's not worth it. Whatever we do, can't do this one thing.
I just love that Anthony is beating the American exceptionalism out of people on the team. Because, like, American exceptionalism is definitely a thing, which is why the question was asked. But I just love the idea of Anthony committing violence to remove the exceptionalism from people.
Yeah, like, look, sometimes when we do the pairings for scrims, I just throw people into the fucking dumpster, and I'm like, good luck with this terrible pairing. Go get owned by some European man you've never heard of. All right, cool, now you know.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to touch back on is, like, it's so easy to not get exposed to, like, European players. Like, the only reason that I'm exposed to European players at all is because I ended up making Fight Club with Anthony, who's on here, and then now is Stat Check. And, like, before that, when I was writing articles for Frontline Gaming, like, I was emailing people, like, and I was like, I don't know if these people are going to respond to emails from this random dude. And I ended up, I think, emailing all sorts of people in Australia and made some very good friends that way. But like outside of that and like writing that article series, I would never have met like 90% of the people that I know. Like obviously on this show right now for content with two European players, I never would have been exposed to otherwise. And like the average player in an American city doesn't know anything about anybody outside of like their locale, essentially.
Yeah, and they might just through things like Fireside, Contact Lost, etc. know some amount, but like the general band is quite narrow unless you're like forcibly exposed.
Definitely.
So I've got a similar follow-up to what Tweak asked just moments ago, because you've mentioned like lack of streaming of European events. Do you think that's like a real issue that because of that Americans don't get much sight of the events or don't pay much attention to it. And given that this year the WT has put work into getting more coverage, do you think it will actually attract more interest? Is it something that can, I don't know, be leveraged in the US?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so we've made a pretty like concerted effort to spread out the team this year so that in all the, because every player exists in a locale, and through that he can spread the, the word of the WTC by word of mouth, right? So the fact that it's going to be streamed this year and people can actually watch it outside of like specifically just the French stream last year, will, I think, massively grow it, right? The US is, as a general rule of thumb, very hungry for 40K content. They like, viewership is quite high for a lot of the events that, we put on. And I think that the WTC representing the pinnacle of basically 40K play should convert in that way. Again, I think part of that, at least from as far as US viewership goes, will come from the fact that like in most given areas, people that play at GTs will have the opportunity to be like, hey, this local player of mine is playing in the War Masters or playing in the teams or whatever it may be. Most locales have some level of representation in the team, and that'll help from again, an American perspective. The hope is that like we figure out whatever our application process is for next year, and we get like a big rush of applicants and people are more enthused, and we can kind of grow the team scene in the States.
So that's
now that you mention it, I think I saw some club or TO or whatever in the US making a fundraiser to send their representative to the War Master GT. I think there was something like that. I don't know if it's okay.
It's possible. It's not anything I'm keyed up into.
Yeah, but it's what you said a couple seconds ago is crazy interesting, because we've been talking to some tournament organizers in Europe, and I mean like major tournament organizers in Europe, and according to them, I mean they just decided to forego making a stream at their huge event whatsoever, and they said nobody is going to sit through a 3-hour or a 4-hour game, and we're just not going to do that. We can do like a studio summary, we can do maybe the stream of like the final 16 or something like that, but we're not going to stream games throughout the tournament because people will just not sit through all that. Nobody does that. So would your message be different? And is that then, I don't know, cultural, that Americans want to sit through 3 hours of a game?
Yeah, I mean, you can look, like, it depends a lot on the quality of the stream being put on, right? Like when Joe from War Games Live, who is doing the WTC coverage, or at least part of it, puts on a stream, that man is in the 4 digits for viewership most of the time that he streams. And like he does great in terms of like subs and support and like all the things. Like he does really well because he puts a lot of time, effort, and money into his stream. Now, for an organizer, if you're like, what you do is organize tournaments, right? Like the UKTC as an example, right? That is a business that runs events. Is it worth it necessarily to spend the X thousands of, pounds to set up streaming from scratch? Like, will you necessarily see a return on it? Will it be a loss leader for your business? I don't know. Maybe. But also, people are very keen to watch. And when it is an option, people love it. They seem to eat it up, as a general rule of thumb. It's just like the calculus from like the business perspective is tough if like that's not what your business is, right? If your business isn't streaming events, then it might be tough if your business is running events. But like, I think there's space for that. It's just hard to like sell because I don't know specifically, right?
There's a lot of money that needs to go into that streaming equipment, I suppose. That upfront capital cost is probably the major factor, I suppose.
Yeah, and you don't want to like put all the money in because it's not like you can turn that stuff into something else. And like technology in general doesn't usually have a great resale rate, so it can get a little sketchy. But it just depends, like,
So I guess one of the questions that we always ask is like, so how we're going to talk a little bit about 10th edition now.
Oh no, you know how I feel about this already.
I know. But we're going to ask first, how has 10th edition kind of changed the preparation scheme for Team USA? Or how has Team USA been adapting to 10th edition so far?
So early in the like setup, we were kind of like, we're gonna get an edition change. It seems like. So from the minute all the things are publicly available, we hit it as hard as physically possible. And in spite of the edition, most people have kept to that, which has been helpful. It is a lot more prep than has gone into previous years. I think that if we tried to play 10th with the amount of reps that we had going into 9th, I'm not confident we would like single digit place. But because everyone kind of like stuck to the party line and like has been grinding and practicing, I think it's okay. I think the addition itself leads to a lot of taking the player skill out of a lot of matchups. And a lot of it's going to come down to like knowing when it's time to lean into the fact that you just need to play to your house and try to dice this man. And I think that 10th adds a lot more of that may not have existed before. Because like sometimes the matchup hits the pairing table and you're like, all right, this is a disaster. Good luck on the 4-ups, bro. And that's how it goes. And that's just the matchup sometime in 10th. That's the life we lead. But yeah, 10th has taken a little bit, like speaking personally, not for the team, of like the enjoyment from the process for me. I'm going through it all the same, but like I truly do not think that at the end of WTC we will have a clear picture of which team is best at 40k because of 10th. I think we will have a good idea of who like shot the luck streak and like found some of the stuff that like may or may not have been intended as we try and navigate these FAQs. But like it'll be a massive achievement that requires excellent play top to bottom to win. I just 10th takes a lot of the good feels I have away in that regard. I think last year, like, there is no argument that the Aussies weren't the best players in the room. I think that this year it's a little more touch and go.
So I always ask this question in these series, and it's, I think, a good follow-up from what you just said. Do you think that the introduction of a new edition evens the field, or do you think it gives like the more experienced teams or team like yourselves a bit more advantage over the others?
I think the teams that have players that can devote full days like of just like what would normally be like a work week into it, a huge advantage, right? To pretend otherwise is silly. Like the people that can put 40 plus hours a week into Warhammer are advantaged over those that have to spend that time with job, kids, so on and so forth. So I think it's a large advantage from that perspective. Yeah.
Were there a lot of like team events that Team USA has participated in on the way to the WTC? Like I remember you spoke not so long ago. I can't remember if it was, I think it was on StatCheck. You said that you participated in a teams event and you didn't like the way that tiebreaker worked or something like that, that there was one event that I recall. Were there many of those that we just don't know about, or was it like a single one?
No, it was just the one. So the States in general is a bit teams event starved. There's not a lot of them. This year we had one that was run by Games Workshop that we were able to put essentially 2 teams at, because Art of War fielded a team, which was the 3 of the people that are currently starting. And then there was like a Team USA team that was some of the prospects and Sean. And then, so we were able to play, kind of in that one team event, which was cool. And that's kind of it. Like I played at Alpine Cup, but I was the only Team USA representation there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that we definitely are lighter on like in-person team events than as compared to other countries for sure. It is probably, frankly, our like primary disadvantage going into the event. Like we play lots of 40K, we play lots of competitive 40K. We probably have as many hours into it as lots of other more experienced countries. Lots of other countries have more teams experience than us.
So I get to ask hard question number 2 now. And it's again about international perceptions. and perhaps negative international perceptions.
Okay.
I'm sure you're real excited about these.
Yeah, I love these. These are my favorite. It's fine. It's not like more of my 40K friends are European than American. It's okay.
It's true. So there's also a public perception that Team USA has an advantage over the other international teams by having advanced knowledge of rules releases. And do you think that this is actually an advantage that Team USA has? Do you want to respond to these people who are like throwing shade at the United States?
I mean, I think that advantage exists for several teams, and to pretend it's incongruent is silly, especially considering like one of the teams can go have beers with the dudes that write the rules on a Tuesday. So like the idea that America is particularly advantaged in that area is silly, but I'm definitely also not going to pretend that there's no content creator advantage, because I think people that say that are like basically lying. Like there is an advantage to having rules sooner. If someone is unable to take advantage of that, that is on them. So, but like as a general rule of thumb, that is real. Like you get weeks sometimes to explore a rule set. And if you can't take advantage of that, that's its own problem, but it is objectively an advantage. But I think other teams have that too in some ways. So
just want to throw more shade at other teams and be like, you guys can.
I mean, certain teams just also have it. I don't have a problem with this perception, actually. Like, I do think it's a real thing that, like, as content creators, you do have information early. But often, some of the teams throwing said shade also have content creators. Sometimes those content creators are on Art of War. What are we doing?
So now I also get the brilliant ability to now ask an easy question. to read sometimes.
Yeah.
So this was my question that I asked England last week. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Who do you think wins in a fight? American NASCAR fans or British football hooligans?
Oh, it's the football hooligans every time. It's not even close. NASCAR fans, like, if they're allowed to have the guns, maybe. But, like,
I love
that.
I just want to tell you that the pattern of that exact answer was the same as Team England last week.
Yeah.
It's definitely the soccer hooligans, but not if they have guns.
Yeah. Like, the football hooligans take it every time. The orcs were based off them, like, one for one. They take damage well, they swarm you, they got choppers. It's dangerous. But, you know, guns, scary. I'm just saying. It could get squirrely. Depends how many football hooligans, one-on-one, no weapons. Depends on the context.
When I was doing my my bachelor degree in like English teaching as a second language, I had a professor from the UK who basically taught us about like the reality of living in the UK. That was like a faculty that we had, and one whole class was devoted to English football hooligans, and he even brought like literal examples of weapons to the class to demonstrate like what the British football hooligans would bring to a stadium. And he said at some point it was for like there were, you know, body searches and so on, so football hooligans weren't allowed to bring like pipes and stuff that they would normally do. So they were ingenious in that they took like in the UK, you have something like broad papers, which are like newspapers that are extremely big, and they would take those, bring them to the stadium, then they would fold them 7 times into essentially a club, and they would club each other on the heads with a bent newspaper. So,
oh my God.
I mean, you know, NASCAR fans with their weapons don't stand a chance against the British hooligans and their ingenuity.
Apparently not.
And their orc technology.
Exactly, and their belief in their strength and power.
Their belief in the newspaper.
Exactly.
In fairness, you could probably injure a NASCAR fan by just making them read. So,
to be fair, you probably could do that to an English soccer hooligan too.
Possible. I don't know them as well.
So about knowing, people from Europe and so on, I'll come back to that question because I think it somehow got lost in the conversation. What were your conclusions from the European trips that you have had? So you've been to Scotland, you've been so I hear you've been to Scotland, you've been to England, you've been to Poland. Did you collect like any experience from that? Go back to the Art of War house and say, so listen, guys, in Europe, in Poland, they do this and this and this. Oh, by the way, the żurek is delicious, but
It's the
tactically they
best.
do this and
It's
this.
my
Yeah,
favorite food.
of course. So yeah, so
Um,
tell us about your lessons learned from your trips.
So, I mean, you can see a lot of the lessons I've taken from other places kind of in how Team USA was structured this year, right? Mandatory TTS practices, big thing from Poland. Like the way the team is like structured and like essentially forced to practice now is stuff that I've taken from other places. Yes, we are very good. Yes, our team is very talented, but that won't really mean anything if we don't also put the work in. And the entire purpose of this year and the things I've learned from like those other systems has been basically to do that. It's like a short answer to what could be a much longer answer, I guess. But like as a general rule of thumb, it's like a lot of the things that we were doing. Just a matter of like drilling, practicing, getting people onto armies early just so that they can get the reps, because that's really what matters. Like a huge takeaway from Alpine was that our team comp for Alpine changed like an hour before lists were due, to essentially put us all on armies that we really liked that had a comfortable points floor, so we could all play into comfort, play things that we had a lot of reps on, except for Typhus, but he was the most practiced he'd ever been for an event for that one. And we kind of leaned into our strengths rather than trying to like shuffle a bunch of nonsense to cover weaknesses. And as bad as things could go, we would always score pretty well because we gave ourselves a points floor that kept things safe. I've tried to move that into the way we're approaching it this year, where we all like get reps. Like the thing that will matter most is not that your army is 2 or 3% better or 5% better even. It's that you've seen the like matchup you're going into a bunch of times so you know what you have to do. It is infinitely more important that we're comfortable and well drilled than that we're like on like the very specifically technically best thing. Also the interaction of like how good an army is a lot less important than how it pairs, right? You can put together a sick army comp that has no first two defenders because no one wants to go out there and eat shit, and then your army comp's not that good. So it just depends, right? But that's a lot of like experience-based things that I can now take from, the experiences of my friends, right? Like we don't have to relearn those lessons live. I can just be like, hey, that person taught me a thing and they're really good at this. I've been doing this for a long time. Let's do that.
So to take that into account, you know a lot of people from like the top teams, but this year's WTC will also see at least 2 United Nations teams, and then it will also see 4 newcomers. Do you take them into account as well, and do you treat them as like equal or worthy opponents? Because Team New Zealand has, among other talents, David Gaylord on board. Team South Africa, I learned recently, is being coached by Kyle Grundy from the UK, which again is nothing to scoff at. So it sounds like the newcomers, the new kids on the block, actually are powerhouses as well. Are you taking them into the equation when you prepare for the event, or it's not really?
So again, this might be a unique perspective thing for me. So before 40K, I used to fight. I used to do MMA, Muay Thai. And like, a mantra that I live by even in 40K is like my most dangerous opponent is my next one. So we, as a general rule of thumb, try not to sleep on anybody we're about to play, right? It could be anyone that like stops the run. If we're just like disrespectful and don't play the way that we're supposed to, especially in 10th edition, anyone can just like end your show right there. Last year we kept it respectful and we put up huge points in the pod. That was very helpful down the line in the tournament. we look to do the same this year. Again, like you said, a lot of those like, you know, newer teams are not led by new players. So anyone in WTC can be dangerous. Like kind of like what I was saying earlier when I was introducing people to setting up matrices. You're playing against one of the 8 best players in that tournament. Treat them as such. Unless you're playing Eldar or GSC, then you get to do whatever you want because, you know, 10th. Whee!
All right. Following on that, this is not a hard question, I promise.
Okay. I'm here for the hard questions. You can give me
I
the
know.
tough ones.
I know. I mean, I guess it might be a hard question because I'm going to ask you to throw shade at somebody. You got to
Oh,
throw
that's
shade
not
at
hard.
somebody.
Yeah. That's not hard.
So, who is the team that the United States wants to beat the most? What's the team that you guys want to go out and that you just want to beat? What's the rival team? The team that is just the team you want to go and get?
And why is it England?
And why is it England?
So England actually has to earn being the rival again. They can be our rival when we don't hang 3 digits on them. If maybe this year they can keep us down into the double-digit realm. Like Poland beat the brakes off us and only scored 90. Be better, England. So not England is basically where I'm going with this. I will note in advance that I lost in the round against England. Harrison beat me senseless, but that's irrelevant. We won the round. So
The advantage of team play.
that's right, baby. Someone's got to lose. We're not going to win all the games. We almost did.
Oh.
Anyway, honestly, the team that I'm most looking forward to playing is actually Poland. Their roster, I know portions of their roster really well. I know portions of their roster like super tight. Pumbaa's my boy. And I have a tattoo bet running with Typhus and Pumbaa, so it's real important that we beat them.
So tell us about the tattoo bet before you go too much further.
I'll get there in 1 second. So like
Okay.
dream scenario for me is that we play Poland in the finals and win. That would be like piece de resistance. That would be, doesn't get any better than that. But that round is going to be rough. So I'm looking forward to it either way. But like, again, yeah, it's probably them. But like rivalry is not the right word for it because I don't feel that way about any, like, there's no team that I look at and I'm like, Like, I would love to beat the Aussies properly instead of just like high side of the drawing them. That would be cool. But like, yeah, there was enough turnover in that roster that I don't feel as like we're coming for you the same way that I do for like the team that I have the tattoo bet with. Partially because Liam's a coward with no faith in his team and won't take the bet. But
Wow.
But that's the world we live in. So it is what it is. Sorry, what was the other question that you asked me?
What's the tattoo
The
bet?
bet, yeah.
Yeah, you got to
So-
tell us the tattoo bet.
I have an open bet. Any captain is willing to take this. I have already made good on one of these, so you know I am serious. It's very simple. If you take my bet and you place higher than the American team, you being the captain of your country places higher than ours, I will get your logo tattooed on my left leg. If the Americans outpace your team, you have to get our logo. Straightforward. Now, originally, I proposed this bet to Pumbaa, and he took it instantly, which at the time was a little alarming. But Typhus leaned in and was like, he took that way too fast. He hasn't even been drinking. He doesn't have any tattoos. This is a terrible idea. So as a show of support, if he has to do this, I'll do it also. So I get 2 of them if we beat them. That's very important to me.
Has this changed how you're preparing the team? Are you like, look, guys, we're going to get 2 tattoos out of this on
I mean, I
2
definitely-
different people?
I definitely told the team, and I definitely put like 8 to 12 hours a day into WTC prep. So like, you know, it's not informing how we prepare.
And is there a team that you want to just like stumble out the gate, like fall flat on its face and just like end up from the top 10 to like the bottom 50 or whatever? I don't know how many teams there are in the WTC, as you can tell.
I mean, it would be funny if it happened to England, but that's pretty much it. I wish everybody else great success.
Except England.
What
So-
was it? Hashtag anyone but England, right?
It also
Yeah,
applies
right.
to this situation quite well. Anyone
Yeah,
but
yeah, like,
England
again,
brings success.
Everyone else does great except England. I love Vic, but the rules are the rules. You got to root against England.
Yep. Everyone feels the same, I guess. So about
Yeah.
rivalries and about like enemies and so on. I'm going to use this to segue to the next question. So sometimes it
Okay.
is that your biggest enemy is your own head, and
For sure.
I wanted to ask you, since we don't have Sean here, but you know him well, he's the captain. I wanted to ask you about him and his tools and capabilities to manage the team, the celebrities, the ego, but also the psyche. Um, like, is there anything? Are there any techniques or anything else that he does to manage the team? And then, what is your role in it as well? Because you make it sound like you are his right hand in this.
Yeah, I do the things that Sean doesn't want to, basically.
Okay.
Which is a fair amount of things outside of like being in charge of the team when we're at the event. Which, to his credit, Sean is amazing at. There is no one I would rather have in charge of us when we're like boots on the ground in the situation. He's really, really good at managing player morale, be that ego or tilt. He keeps us like cohesive and functional very well. Given the collective state of our morale after we had gotten like beat up pretty good by Poland, rallying us to at least draw Germany was a feat of leadership. Like that was very well executed. I don't know what like specific methods past like being a generally like very empathetic and level-headed and calm person to go to when you were freaking out, because like, you know, sometimes you throw and you can get, you know, the ability to go to your captain who's not going to then yell at you, who's just going to be like, all right, we got more games to play, or maybe we don't, but either way, like he like is very good at reaffirming that like even if you fuck it up, you're still part of the team and everyone's like gonna be okay with it, which reduces, you know, the stress levels when you're in something this like high on the competitive end. As far as myself, I've just tried to like make a diverse team that has a lot more camaraderie than we had last year. By, you know, like making us practice. You know, we meet once a week so that everyone can like talk and hang out and BS and play practice games together and stuff like that. So we're a lot tighter knit than we were last year, which I think will help a lot with when, you know, when the lights are on and things get tough and, you know, we're in it and it's, you know, hot in a Belgian airport, like air hangar, like we're, you know, still unified and tight and able to play together through the difficult situations rather than like, you know, breaking apart at the first signs of trouble. But yeah,
Okay.
I absolutely agree that like for all the teams that are well positioned, right? Like it is very easy to be in a good position going in and just kind of like trip yourself up. I mean, like you have the good example of last year of how like the opposite of that basically was that like Poland's first round, they drew Belgium, which was largely very unexpected. But instead of them taking that and like spiraling, that like I joke all the time that like awoke the Necrons basically. Like you pissed off the Tomb World, and then they just went through the rest of the event until they hit the Australians, just murdering people. So like that's, you know, that's what you want to see out of a team that is like that hits a struggle point. You want them to like be like, oh, adversity, cool, and bounce back and fire back, not kind of break and fall apart.
Right. So this breaking and falling apart and stress management. You are a coach. So I don't know if I can ask this, but usually this is probably something that I would have to pay for. But in your coaching, is there anything that you teach to your trainees about stress management at events? Is there anything specific so is there anything specific that you do that perhaps could serve as a piece of advice to our listeners, to people going to the War Masters, the WTC, etc., how to manage stress at a major event?
So I think that most people at a tournament underestimate how much time they have and get really stressed that they need to move like right now. I got to do stuff right now, especially at the WTC. Those rounds are long, and you do not get
Yeah.
bonus points at the end for how many minutes are left on your clock. I wish someone would tell Innes that. Like, you got time, just chill. So, obviously, if you're in a situation that is anxiety causing, just chill. It's not helpful advice. So, what I recommend is at the start of like literally any turn you are going to take, don't do anything in your command phase. Literally just go to the other side of the table and spend like 2 minutes of your clock stood there. Just be like, if I'm in his shoes, how do I feel about this? What am I worried about? Stuff like that. Take a minute to be out of like your head and your position as that player and go approach it from their perspective for a minute. I find that this gives me a little bit of time to not like be, you know, the Anthony who is stressed and be like the opponent who I get to respond to for a minute. And this I find very helpful as a more aggressive player for setting up situations that will then be stressful for them to react to, as opposed to me having to be the one that's answering the questions the whole time. Jason's played me. He's seen me do this.
It's disarming, actually, how Anthony plays like almost like a Zen calm the whole time. Like he's just sitting there staring at you as you do stuff, and he's like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Although to me it was definitely me doing the thing where I was like, "I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to do something stupid."
I tried to stop you.
And Anthony was definitely like, "You don't need to do that," and I'm like, "Oh, but I have to," and I did it, and then I lost.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. As a general
pro gamer move.
Yeah.
Mhm.
As a general rule of thumb, I think that 40k is best played cooperatively. I think it's really difficult when you try and play like super hard line against your opponent. So like if I see someone about to do some shit that I think is crazy, I'll be like, "Hey, I think that shit looks kind of crazy. Maybe it doesn't have to get crazy." And then like 99% of the time, what he was explaining happens. And they're like, "Nah, it's not crazy. It's got to get crazy." Bam. And then it gets crazy. And they're like, "How did it get crazy?" But as a general rule of thumb, you can avoid things getting out of hand by just like slowing down the game a little bit, right? Have like a checklist that you're trying to go through in the beginning of a turn. Be like, "Hey, I'm trying to accomplish X, Y, Z this turn. How do I get there?" Right? Because if you're like, "Oh, this happened. Now I'm going to lose." Like those are not useful thoughts right now. Like if you're in the middle of losing, knowing that you're losing or thinking about how you're losing, not helpful. We're playing differential. Points. Like what gets you points? Even if you're up, like it's weird because like being up is almost more stressful in diff because you're like, I really gotta push. Like I need this over. So you can never just kind of like sit back and cruise. But like again, just like I can't say it enough. Try and slow the game down. It's gonna be okay. You know, you're not at risk. Well, maybe you're a little bit at risk depending on what team you play for. But like, it's going to be all right. Just slow the game down, take it one step at a time, look at the things you need to do in that turn. And that would be my general suggestion. But always like approach it from their perspective first. Because like, honestly, sometimes you'll just miss units that were behind ruins. If I had $1 for every time that I like was like, "Oh shit, there's a squad there," that alone is worth doing. So yeah, those are the tips.
Cool.
So
Thanks.
thank you for the free tip we ripped off of you. You're not making any money on this one.
Yeah, you caught me.
So we'd like to move to a short chat about 10th edition, which I have the impression you don't like. Nevertheless,
me again.
So let's maybe start with the question about the FAQ that was published last week, I believe. Is that did it come soon enough? Is it enough of a change? And how do you feel about it in general?
So I think it came soon enough. That part's cool. They did it pretty quick. I like that. I don't think it functionally changed basically anything about the position of those armies. It made them go from like definitively number one in the case of Eldar to like 1B, you know, like cool, I guess. The point increases on towering things just seemed like, you know, like a please be quiet fix more than it was like a actually trying to resolve something. I just don't like. I don't think it's like nearly enough. Like, I don't foresee a world where it like changes many teams' comps or anything like that. Like, if you had your 8, you're not suddenly like, oh, we gotta cut Eldar, you know. Especially because like by my perspective, it seems like every team has some like wizard who just coincidentally is usually the captain or near the leadership that happens to be an Eldar one trick. And we can just all pretend that that's a coincidence from how good Yunari was for so long. But yeah, like I don't think it did nearly enough. I would like to see more out of Games Workshop from this. I think they released a fundamentally broken edition at like the core rules level, and I don't think points or anything approximating close enough to resolve the problem.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I've heard Anthony talk about this a lot. So
yeah, I mean, I can
Okay.
represent those opinions in new and exciting ways. I'll answer as many questions as you've got, but broadly, I'm not like super excited about the current state of the game. And I think we kind of just like do what we can to pilot in a meta that is rough.
So, how did it come to be so bad, the edition, if all those content creators had access to it that much earlier on?
I think that if content creation was treated like playtesting is in other games, you would have a much better shot at there being balance, but it just isn't. The men in Nottingham know best, and like they get upset when you play their game wrong, and that's on you as the player for taking their rules that are so clearly laid out and perverting them into a competitive endeavor, or so they say.
How dare you?
Yeah, how dare you try and play their game that has a competitive booklet designed for a tournament? Whatever. Let's just ignore that. It's hard not to have some level of vitriol about it because it is a thing I care a whole lot about. And it's been funny to like watch the process of me being like very open about this from like basically the minute we had it and being like, this is bad, like as a competitive endeavor, like this is not well set up for this. And people, were a little condescending between like the, like baby's first edition chain because I haven't been playing that long, and like, oh, Anthony's such a doomer, he's so salty. It's like, okay. And then like, you get a month or two in and like only 2 armies exist on a podium. The game is like fundamentally having issues. Tournaments that fired in years previous with like 100 plus attendees run with like 30. And you're like, oh, maybe, just maybe, we have a problem.
Mhm.
But who am I? It's my first edition changer, so they say. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's fine. Or maybe there'll be an emergency patch after Stu Black watches people stunt on everybody in Tacoma with towering. But maybe I'm wrong.
Or maybe again, someone from GW needs to come to a tournament and see what Desolators do.
Yeah. Maybe you get surprised when you find out that the Nerf guns are good. Who knows? Far be it from me. I'm just a man playing a game that's not meant to be played competitively, or so they say, competitively.
And only with your first edition change under
That's
your
right.
belt now. So
Yeah.
it's like,
You're
who the
just
hell
not
are you,
used to
mate?
this.
Yeah, who's this guy? He doesn't know shit.
Exactly. Nothing.
Is there
nothing at all.
anything you like in the new edition?
Um,
Any one rule or whatever? Because I guess you're not an Elda player.
I am not. Very sadly, I actually had Harlequins, so rest in peace to the boys. So I think that with how much they've beat Melee into the ground, that you could take Devastating Wounds and leave it on only melee weapons and leave it otherwise unchanged, and it would be an okay rule.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah,
there were a
I
lot
agree.
of like so many of my favorite things about that paragraph basically were the number of conditions that were placed on it as we moved through it. It's like, first, we're going to talk about this is only for melee. Second, we're going to change something about a rule. Third, now the rule is okay.
And now it's okay. I mean, like,
broken.
very selfishly, as someone that likes to punch things, I like that you get to hit things you didn't charge. It's really funny to declare a 3-inch charge and punch some dude that's like 11 inches over that way because you rolled all right on the charge, and then just manipulated the fight phase. I don't like that is a lot more obfuscated, actually. That drives me nuts because I basically get to do the same tricks that I used to do, but now if someone's new, they feel like I'm lying to them. So that part's cool. But yeah, I mean, there is like there's more army rules is cool. Like I was pretty actually which is funny given like how like upset I've been at the power level of 10 before, like as Nathan can attest to, I was all like, give everybody crazy rules and let's play this game at full gas person for ages. It's just turned out that the way they done that wasn't that they actually gave everybody cool rules. They give like 3 armies cool rules and then everybody else gets to die to them. Which like you know what? I found it. The saving grace of 10th edition is that Death Guard is still awful.
They have their own tier on every tier list. It's
Yeah.
just the Death Guard tier.
Yeah.
By themselves.
Come on. Guys, stop it. They're already dead. Not
They're
that
not dead enough.
That and the Guard gets to be an NPC faction again. That part's cool. I'm a big fan of those two things.
That does hurt my feelings, but also the Guard playstyle that they proposed in the indexes is so boring.
It's just the worst.
Like when the moment I read the index special rule, though, I knew it was going to be boring. They're yeah, so Guard armies just shouldn't move. And I was like, cool, in a game where dynamic movement's important, you made an entire army that's not supposed to move. That's cool.
Yeah. Tweak, for context, what it's worth, I think Death Guard are like one of the coolest armies aesthetically in the game. And if I had taken the bait offered by the store owner that I had walked into and just played the army I thought looked cool, I would have stopped playing 40K so fast and it would have made your head spin. We would never be having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just happy that I have 3 armies and not just one, because if
brother,
I was
you don't
stuck
get
with
that
just
many.
this one. I mean, I know what happened to your world eaters and where they are now, so yeah, exactly. Avocado.
All
Just
three
So
of the
long,
armies that
flying boy.
all 3 of the armies that I played last edition have also just kind of like fallen from grace like quite far. Like Drukari, like I don't know.
Oh,
I
man.
don't want to play Darklands City. That army is so boring looking. They made Guard boring. Like Guard weren't the most exciting army, but they took like the 2 most exciting things about it and were like, you can't do those things anymore. And then
Of all the things that make me
Harlequins
sad-
are just not a faction anymore.
of all
and
the things that
then-
make me sad, Drukari makes me the most sad.
There was a brief moment of excitement for me. They're like put out the power from pain rules and like explain the token system. I was like, man, I'm ready. They're going to keep with the melee trading. It's going to be great. And then they released like the first few melee profiles in the index. And I looked at it and I was like, huh, you found a way to make me sad again. Good
Yeah.
job, GW.
Those profiles sure do look like they had some keywords removed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't even think that
Devastating
Incubi,
wounds.
I don't even think if they put devastating wounds on Incubi, which is one of the ones that's like obvious, that Incubi would even be like pinging the surface as far as balance problems would be at this point.
Oh no. Not
No,
even fucking close.
them and Possessed, I think, are like, well, Possessed have devastating wounds still, but like those 2 things are like relatively similar. Like I think in the amount of damage they just put out, but neither of them are like a drop in the bucket next to a 2 heavy Wraith Cannon wielding like Wraith Knight just plinking. I played a test game for a GT that's coming up like 2 days ago, and I did 40 mortal wounds with 1 Wraith Knight across 3 turns, basically.
No,
Are
I
you
thought it
only
was about to be in a single activation, and I was like,
It was like
Okay.
20 in the first. It was 20 in the first activation. It
Yeah.
was 20. Into a Custodes player, so it like wasn't as meaningful, but it was just like an obscene number of mortal wounds off the cuff.
see, Possessed make me nervous, right? So I love Possessed. They're like my favorite CSM sculpt. I love the unit. I love what it does. I love what it's about. Their melee profile is fucking garbage, but they have devastating wounds. However, devastating wounds is something that needs to be changed for the health of the game. It leaves me very conflicted as a person because, like, the second you take devastating wounds away from Possessed, boy, is 5-1-2 not a real melee profile. So we'll see. We'll see what they decide. I don't know anymore. 10th has caused me great anguish, and I'm playing it anyway because I love the 40K community.
It's true.
Yeah,
We keep
I feel
making
you.
content for it.
Yeah, I love
So
my
I did-
build.
Paying your bills as well, but that's like a tiny
Well,
detail.
I mean, that's IT is for that.
So there is, I think everyone is in unison. I haven't heard anyone say a bad thing about the missions in this edition. So okay, yeah. I mean, so
Volunteer.
first of all, let's listen to your take on it, and second of all, the United States are, canonically bound to ITC missions. So I guess ninth was like a wet dream come true because all the missions were ITC missions in ninth. Does that mean that the team might have some, let's say, tougher time getting used to the new mission system, or have you already got it broken down and everything is clear?
So on the second half, I'll answer that one first, actually, because it's a little bit easier and it kind of ties into my answer from the first. I think that the card scoring is so laughably easy, it could be accomplished by a new player without much effort. It like pretending that those cards are difficult to score is like pretending that GSD still requires a skilled pilot. It just doesn't. Like they're like, hey man, count how many fingers are on your right hand. Oh, you score that many points. Sick. Good job, buddy. High five. That's like half the cards in the deck. Now, granted, you can get scammed. Like it can happen. You can draw like bring it down, assassinate, turn one against an army that's hidden and be upset. But for the most part, those cards are so easy to score that I don't think there's much like learning curve here. There's a little bit of like card game element of like track the things that are remaining in your deck so that you can, score them next turn. But that's real like pay attention at all level of engagement with them. At least, and like when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about like for players that are going to be at the WTC playing for their national team. Like for the average player's interaction, there's more to it, I'm sure. But if you're going to be playing the game 20 hours a week anyway, it's not that hard. I dislike the missions because, like, on the face of it, we remove half the rules off the jump. Like, most of the time you play without a mission rule. So, like, the idea that we're like, these missions are great, just ignore all the parts that are bad, is like, okay, sure. I guess that's one way to start this. And then we're like, okay, but take half of the primary missions. Don't worry about that shit either. Just don't play any of those. And it's like, oh, okay. And then you get down to it, and it's like, okay, so what are my options? And it's like, oh, it's like these 3 missions. It's like, well, those are just the 9th missions, but we only have 5 objectives now. It's like, yeah, except for sometimes you have 4. Isn't that crazy? And you're like, what are we doing? What do you mean? What? So, other hot take is that I thought faction secondaries were great. I thought that they were an interesting balance lever that they could use to make bad armies good, like they did with Necrons. Because even at the tail end of things, you're really, as a general rule of thumb, if you weren't playing Ghetto specifically, getting cabled by Necrons. Like that wasn't really the experience. So they were just outscoring you. And now, if an army is bad, you don't get to be like, well, we'll up the points on deploy teleport homers, because that just makes the armies that are already good better. There's no like room for engagement there, or like flavorful stuff like Blood Angels, like Fury in the Lost, right? Where it's like send the Death Company in. Yes, that secondary was too easy, but also it made you build your list in a way that is like vaguely fluff orientated, which seems to be a goal. The removal of those only further improves, not to like dunk on the Death Guard too hard again here, like fast MSU armies.
Yeah.
Being a slow, not MSU army is like, what do you do when you draw behind enemy lines? Nothing. You cry and discard it at the end of the turn. Like it just is what it is. So yeah, as a general rule of thumb, I think that the rest of the edition is so bad that the missions seem good by comparison. But if you actually take some time to like sit and look at the missions are only good if you ignore 2/3 of them. At which point, are they good? Or are we just being real selective and it's like just kind of fine?
So isn't it a saving grace that perhaps the new mission system somehow forces players to come up with various different unique army compositions? Because previously, like if you look at what Innes did, for example, and then Nathan borrowing his list, they would just build a list to do this set of missions, and they would go to 17 tournaments in a row, basically with the same list, and do the same thing over and over and over again. Isn't it different now in that the missions are more random? You need to account for that in your army composition.
I think the balance of 10th is so off that you don't have to do that at all. Like, if you had any intention of winning a singles event right now, you'd play one of 3 armies, and you blow the doors off everyone you play, and it doesn't matter. And
They can score if they're dead. Yeah.
Yeah, dead models score no points, usually. Sometimes in GSC. But as a general rule of thumb, even if the edition was like perfect, 50% across the board balanced, the secondary deck is so easy that it's like, yes, there is variance in the mission, but that variance is like, which midfield objective do I take this turn for 5 points? Which fast unit do I throw in my opponent's deployment zone for 4? Is that true variance? Or are you just not allowed to know, like, wink, wink, not allowed to know before you draw it? I don't know. It doesn't seem that different to me. Like, the army composition largely looks pretty similar. You take trash to score, you take gas to kill. It's the same as it was, right? The only difference now is that sometimes you get scammed, and there's not a lot to do for those situations, right? Like, when you get scammed, you're just like, all right, that's a CP, I guess. Like, you know, you draw take enemy outpost or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, we ain't doing that this turn. Into the garbage you go, buddy. But like, because you'll never fully cycle through the deck in a game, and because, again, the secondaries are so easy to score, I don't personally feel like there's any more variance than like matchup variance would have already provided in 9th.
Okay.
That's reasonable. I think they also gave the cop out that people can play fixed if they want. Just make everybody play tactical.
Fixed is good when it's good. Like, the ability to not get card scammed is cool.
Yeah.
I think if someone just like hands you bring it down and assassinate on a platter, you're like, okay.
Sure.
Or when you are Tyranids and you play Biovort.
Yeah, that works too until the opponent has a stick that's 9 inches long.
All right. It's time for everybody's favorite questions. They're the bird combat related questions.
I hate birds, but I'm here.
So the first one, since we have Team America on the show, is a Team America focus question. Who wins in a fight? A New York pigeon or a Chicago pigeon?
Oh, the New York pigeon. It's not even close.
I'm hurt by how fast that answer was, but that's okay.
It's true. Like, you know it in your heart to be true. New York pigeons have seen the darkest shit imaginable. Have you seen a New York City subway rat? Those boys are out there brawling with those monsters, those full-grown dogs for food. No, Chicago, I'm sorry. Not even close.
Unless you bring your buddies from St. Louis. So
Even if you bring them, you could bring as many equivalent pigeons from whatever state you'd like. They're not beating a New York pigeon. Those things have seen the darkest stuff imaginable. I, in my life, have not seen darker stuff than a New York pigeon. I've been stabbed.
The next step is the international bird combat question. And so Jeremy, or Curie for people, was talking up the Canadian goose as the most dangerous bird on the planet. Nobody's national bird can fight a Canadian goose. Except, I want to ask, is the American pigeon, especially if you pick a New York pigeon, capable of fighting a Canadian goose?
I mean, like, it's probably not going to be pretty. Like, I don't know that the pigeon wins. But I do know that that goose will get the fuck up out of New York when it's done. It's not going to want the hand twice. So whatever level of that answer you're comfortable with. Like, I think the Canadian goose en route to New York City dies from the smog. Like, it just doesn't make it. It's used to that, like, nice, you know, when it's not on fire, like, Canadian wildlife. And then it gets into New York City and, like, a taxi hits it. So, like, it's not the same. We're dealing with different skill sets here.
Is this true then for any European bird that we try to bring over for American versus European combat for birds?
No, because, all right, as an example, right, like, I've been to Krakow now, and I've been to, like, different parts of Poland, and, like, their smog and traffic game might keep up with the New York traffic game. So, there's decent odds that makes it to combat with said pigeon, but I don't know enough about their birds to say how the fight goes.
Just need to send you back to Poland so that you can
Do better
observe
research.
and watch these pigeons to determine if they are a good fight for a New York pigeon.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have Typhus here at some point. We can compare notes. Like we'll see how it goes. But like right now, against most contenders, my money is on like the New York environment plus pigeon.
We need to do a matrix
Although-
of birds.
Bird
Yeah.
matrix. We can do it. We can.
Yeah.
The problem is if we use like national birds, is that some birds have like robins as their national birds. Like
Yeah.
England's is a robin, and the American is the bald eagle, which will kill the robin like just 99 times out of 100.
Yeah, like
Minus
the
the time
robin
when
is
the
the
NASCAR
death
fan
guard.
shoots the bald eagle.
yeah, yeah. The like the New York pigeon on table choice very dangerous, but if it's attacking, not the same.
I think that's actually like the opening part, the cold open for the episode. It's just that line from Anthony, just putting it out there.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your candor on the bird combat questions. It's everybody's favorite segment, I'm pretty sure.
I gotta take the questions that I'm given seriously. The hard ones, the bird ones. It is what it is.
People come here just for that. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, everyone has to have their own thing, right? So
Yeah.
that was us.
I don't know why we told me that I needed to repeat these, but I did, and now I am.
There it is.
I love it. So
You have any other
Whatever.
particularly challenging questions for me in the pipe there, Nathan?
No, that's it. That's it for questions. This is where
survived.
yeah. I mean, you answered all those questions very in a straightforward, matter-of-fact way, so good job.
yeah, you've reached the finish line, Anthony. So thanks for your time. Our guest today was Anthony of Team USA. So thank you again. Having answered all those hard questions. Our guest co-host was Nathan from StatCheck. Thanks, Nathan.
You're welcome, as always.
Yeah, pleasure to have you and all your hard and bird questions.
Oh, God.
They really make our show here.
I
Thank
did
you
research
to-
this time. I asked Seth bird-related questions. Seth Oster of Signals from the Frontline fame.
Nice.
You came prepared.
I did. I came bird-paired, yes.
Oh god.
You spent too much time with me.
You should like all of Contact Loss content, by the way. You got to go to youtube.com/c/contact loss, I assume. You should like, subscribe, comment for the algorithm. Go to all the places where this podcast will be. And you should like, subscribe, and give 5-star reviews. Not 1-star reviews. Don't leave those. Just leave a 5-star review like a good, upstanding citizen of the world.
Or just go tell a friend.
Yeah,
We would
Or
appreciate
tell
it.
a
lot.
friend.
Okay, that was unexpected, but very welcome. Thanks, Nathan.
Nobody else seemed to want to do it. So I was going to not Minnesota goodbye our way out of this episode. I was just going to go goodbye.
Well, I was gonna say that, but we sidetracked. Nevertheless,
Nailed it.
And yeah,
We're
So is
really
that just-
scuffing that really well done ending. Right up. We got to the end of it and you're like, oh, that was really nice. And we've just gone on another tangent. I don't know if you're familiar with this concept of the Minnesota goodbye, but we have slapped our knee at least twice trying to stand up, saying, oh, I should get going now. You hear?
oh, it's that right?
yeah,
you know, I didn't know it under that naming convention, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. So that leaves just Tweak, the usual contactless host,
Thank you, everyone.
and myself. Was the Joker today. So,
Anthony crossed the finish line like 5 minutes ago. The rest of the podcast is crawling across it.
yep, it's a
I love
challenge.
the 1 a.m. podcasts, dude. These are the best.
Yeah, let me just
Yeah, it's
end
done.
the recording now.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.